أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. This is our fourth episode in our series Introduction to Ilm al-Rijal or Rijal studies. We left off in the third episode discussing the authority of a Rijali scholar. Where does a Rijali scholar get his authority from? In other words, how do we refer to a Rijali scholar? Under what pretext? Under what justification do we refer to a Rijali scholar and rely on him? So for example, when Shaykh al-Tusi or al-Najashi, they tell us that so-and-so is a thiqah, he's reliable, or so-and-so da'if, this person is unreliable. Under what pretext can we rely on them? In the previous lecture, as we began discussing the authority of a Rijali scholar, we mentioned two pretexts. One is that we rely on a Rijali scholar on the pretext that he's reliable himself, and he's narrating to us, he's telling us about the reliability of someone else. So we rely on him because he's someone who's trustworthy, someone who's reliable. Just like when you go to a person's home and you ask for the qibla and they tell you the qibla is in this direction, do you rely on that person? You do. Why? Because this person's reliable. When someone tells you that this place is pure, that place is impure, you rely on people that are trustworthy, because there's no reason for you to be suspicious or doubtful of what they say. They're reliable. They're thuqat. And so too Rijali scholars, they are thuqat, they are reliable. And when they tell us that others are reliable or unreliable, we should trust them. And we said that this pretext is the opinion of Sayyid al-Khoy. The second pretext was that we refer to Rijali scholars for their testimonies. What they say is a testimonial. It's a testimony. They testify to the reliability of this person or the unreliability of that person. So we take their word just like we take a testimony. The same way we rely upon a testimony, shahada, we rely upon the word of a Rijali scholar. Now, based upon these two pretexts, we mentioned that there's certain problems. One, regarding the first pretext, that if we were to rely upon a Rijali scholar due to the fact that he's just a reliable person, khabar al-thiqa, he's telling us a piece of news that this person's reliable or that person's not reliable. This news, it cannot be based upon their judgment, ijtihad or hats. No, it has to be based on their senses, meaning they saw the person or they met him and they discovered that he's unreliable, so they tell us he's unreliable. Their piece of news, their story, what they're telling us cannot be based upon an opinion. And there's a difference between an opinion and relating a story. Relating a story has to be based upon senses, upon what you saw or what you heard. But an opinion, it's not just based on what you heard. It's based upon your judgment. It's based upon what you think. So, based upon the first pretext, which is based upon hujjiyat khabar al-thiqa, that we can rely upon a reliable source, and that is why we depend on a Rijali scholar. His news, what he tells us, has to be based upon his senses. He either saw the narrator, or he heard him, or it was passed down to him from generation to generation, from one Rijali scholar to another. They told him, for example, that Zurara is reliable. So from one person to another, they were told that Zurara is reliable. This is still hiss, it's not hats. This is not an opinion. It still remains a matter of senses, because it's passed on from one person to another. It's like my grandfather told my father, and my father told me that so and so scholar or so and so person is reliable. So when I tell you, my students or my audience, that so and so scholar is reliable, this is not an opinion. This is not a judgment. It's based upon senses. It's based upon hiss. It's based upon feeling his reliability, sensing his reliability. So this is one. The second pretext is shahada. We take the opinion of a Rijali scholar because it's based on testimony. It's a form of testimony. And we said in the previous lesson that this means that the Rijali scholar has to be a man in some cases. Otherwise, if it's not a man, there has to be two women. Two, the one giving the testimony has to be alive. So how could we rely upon Sheikh Tusi or Najashi when they've been gone for the past 1,000 years? So there's a problem there. The third pretext, and this is what I'd like to discuss now. The third pretext is that what a Rijali scholar says gives us presumption, dhann, presumption, or conjecture. And since we do not have knowledge of the narrators, because we never saw them, we never witnessed them, if you can't have knowledge, you go to the second degree. What is the second degree? Conjecture, presumption, dhann. If you can't have ilm, you go to dhann. Since we didn't meet these narrators, we never witnessed them, we never saw them, so we can't really know for a fact whether they're reliable or not. So we go to conjecture, we go to presumption. And what a Rijali scholar tells us, it gives us presumption. We presume that this person is reliable. Why? Because Najashi said so. Or we presume that that person is unreliable because Sheikh Tusi said so. We presume. So, and presumption, although the Quran says, إِنَّ الظَّنَّ لَا يُغْنِي مِنَ الْحَقِّ شَيْئًا, presumption will not help you prove what is the truth. Although that is the case, but that's the case when it comes, when you can have knowledge, but you avoid knowledge and you go to presumption. So you avoid knowledge and you go to presumption. That is not allowed. But when the door of knowledge is closed and there's no way for us to know for a fact, is this person reliable or not reliable, then we go to presumption. And what a Rijali scholar tells us, it gives us presumption, and that is enough. This is the third pretext. The fourth pretext is that what a Rijali scholar tells us is a form of fatwa. It's a fatwa. Sometimes you give a fatwa, a scholar gives a fatwa and tells us that this is halal, that is haram, this is mustahab, this is makruh. And at other times, a fatwa means A fatwa could be to tell us whether this person or that person is reliable or not reliable. So the same way that a Rijali scholar gives a fatwa regarding what is halal and what is haram, he gives a fatwa that so-and-so narrator and transmitter is reliable or he's unreliable. We consider it as a fatwa. So this is another pretext, but this is also problematic. Why? Because in accepting the fatwa of a scholar, number one, that scholar has to be alive. You cannot accept the fatwa of a deceased marja, according to most. And two, he has to be the most knowledgeable, al-a'lam. And when it comes to Rijal, al-a'lam is a Shaykh al-Najashi. He's more knowledgeable than a Shaykh al-Tusi. So that means if we base it upon the pretext that what a Rijali scholar says is a form of fatwa, and we basically are referring to him as in taqleed, we're doing his taqleed of is this person reliable or not reliable, then number one, he has to be alive. Number two, he has to be al-a'lam, the most knowledgeable. And it's been proven that Najashi is more knowledgeable than Tusi, than Shaykh al-Tusi. And that means we cannot take the words of a Shaykh al-Tusi when he tells us this person is reliable or not reliable. Especially if he conflicts with Najashi. If what he says conflicts with Najashi. For example, Najashi tells us this person is not reliable. Tusi tells us this person is reliable. That means we can no longer take the words of Shaykh al-Tusi. And this is problematic. And three, there's a problem of how can a scholar do taqleed of another scholar. So a jurist now is trying to derive a law, and he's looking at the sources, he's looking at the Quran, he's looking at the traditions, and he refers to a Najashi to authenticate a narrator, a transmitter that is transmitting a hadith. Is he doing taqleed of Najashi? A mujtahid can't do taqleed of someone else. He has to do his own research. So if it's a fatwa, only the lay persons and lay people can do taqleed of a fatwa, not a jurist. So this is a third problem that faces this pretext. The fifth. There's only two more, a fifth and a sixth. The fifth pretext says that what a Rijali tells us, it gives us either certainty, qat', or itmi'nan, assurance. It either gives us qat', certainty that this person is reliable, and certainty is authoritative. I could rely on certainty. I can rely on knowledge. If what a Rijali scholar tells me, it gives me knowledge, it provides me knowledge, there's nothing better than knowledge. There's nothing more important than knowledge. There's nothing clearer than knowledge. We could definitely rely on knowledge. Al-ilmu hujjah. Knowledge has authority, and we could definitely rely on knowledge. And we could also rely on assurance. Atmi'nan. Atmi'nan, it's a stage a bit lower than knowledge. Knowledge, for example, is 100%. Certainty. When you're 100% certain. Assurance is not 100%. It's about 95%. When you're assured, for example, when someone assures you of something, that means you're 90% sure that that thing is accurate. Atmi'nan. And people rely on assurance. People don't always, if they can't get certainty, assurance for them is the same, will do the job. It's not the same, but it'll do the job. Al-Hurr al-Amili in Al-Wasail, in the last volume, in the 20th volume, he says that what a Rijali scholar says, it could sometimes provide us with knowledge and certainty, especially if we collect other pieces of evidence regarding the credibility and the reliability of a narrator. We collect clues and evidence. If we put them all together, and one of those clues and evidence is what this Rijali scholar said, what that Rijali scholar said, this all will give us certainty, qat', knowledge. So this is one. The fifth pretext, it says that the Rijali scholar, what he says either provides us with certainty and knowledge, or atmi'nan, what I'd like to call assurance. Here, As-Sayyid Sistani, Hafidhahullah, and his son, As-Sayyid Muhammad Rida, his eldest son, who was my teacher, and a prominent scholar of Rijal, a Rijali scholar, they both argue, the father and the son, that what a Rijali scholar says gives us atmi'nan. It provides us with assurance. I could be rest assured that this narrator is either credible or not credible, depending on what the Rijali scholar says. If he says he's credible and reliable, I may rely upon him. I may be rest assured that he's reliable. And if he says he's not reliable, then I could be rest assured that he's not reliable. And so, for example, Sayyid Muhammad Rida Sistani, in his book Qabasatun min Ilm al-Rijal, he says that there's two theories when it comes to accepting narrations. And this is a known fact, of course. One theory, and I believe I alluded to this in my previous lecture, that is promoted by Sayyid al-Khoi. He says that we accept the narration that is reported by a thiqah, a reliable source, a reliable narrator. As long as this narration is narrated and transmitted by someone reliable, I could rely on this tradition without a problem. But if one of the chain of narrators is not reliable, there's no way I could rely on this narration, even if it conforms to the Quran, even if it conforms to logic, even if most jurists, they issued a fatwa based on this narration, I can't accept it. This is according to whom? Sayyid al-Khoi. Then chain of narrators has to be authenticated. They all have to be thuqat. This is one opinion. Another opinion, which is the popular opinion, and the majority of scholars, they accept the second opinion. The second opinion says that the narrator doesn't necessarily have to be a thiqah, has to be reliable. No. As long as we are rest assured that this hadith was stated by one of the imams, then that is fine. Well, how are we rest assured that this hadith was stated by the imams? One, it could be the reliability of the transmitters and narrators. Two, it conforms to the Quran. It is compatible with the Quran. Three, it conforms to logic. Four, it confirms historical facts and it conforms to historical facts. It doesn't conflict with historical evidence and historical facts. And so on and so forth. It conforms to other narrations as well. You could tell that, this is something that the imams would say because it looks similar to other traditions. So there's lots of pieces of evidence and clues. If we gather all these evidences and clues, one of them is the reliability of the narrator. This hadith could give us what? Wuthuq, atmi'nan. I'll be rest assured that the imam said this. And so, if it's about assurance, if it's about itmi'nan, what a Rijali scholar tells me could also give me itmi'nan. It could also give me assurance, even if it's one. Here, Sayyid Muhammad Rida Sistani argues that sometimes even if it's one Rijali scholar, like a Najashi or Tusi, he tells me that this person's reliable. That could give me assurance. That could give me اطمئنان. طيب. Here, there's a problem. And the one who mentioned the ishkal, the problem, is a Sheikh Asif Muhsini, a contemporary scholar of Rijal. He says that, but how can we have itmi'nan from one Rijali scholar? One Rijali scholar like a Najashi or a Tusi, he's telling me that so-and-so is reliable. How does that give me itmi'nan? How does that give me assurance? How will I be rest assured that this person's actually reliable? If it was a group of Rijali scholars, 4, 5, I could say that gives me itmi'nan. I could say that gives me assurance that this person's reliable. But if it's just one, how will that give me assurance? This is what Sheikh Asif Muhsini, in his book بحوث في علم الرجال, he poses this problem. بحوث في علم الرجال, page 42. It's only one volume, page 42. Sayyid Muhammad al-Sistani, he responds to this problem. He says, yes, indeed, one Rijali scholar can give us certainty. Can give us itmi'nan, can give us assurance, which could also be translated as certainty. But I translated certainty to mean qat', ilm, knowledge. He says, yes, one Rijali scholar could give us itmi'nan, an assurance. Maybe it varies from person to person, but a professional Rijali scholar today, if he were to read the texts of former Rijali scholars, and he looks at their words and what they say, no doubt he can sometimes have assurance and itmi'nan that this person is reliable and that person is not reliable. So it depends on expertise, and it depends on experience when it comes to ilm al-rijal. طيب. This was the fifth pretext, the last pretext, the sixth pretext, and this is the one that we've chosen, and that is قول أهل الخبرة. A Rijali is a specialist. He's a specialist in ilm al-rijal and Rijal studies. And rational people, we normal human beings, we refer to specialists in every field. We refer to lawyers in law and in legal matters. We refer to engineers in their field. We refer to doctors in their field. And in various doctors, each doctor has his own specialty. We refer to the specialists. In every field, in every science, in every profession, we refer to the specialists and to the professionals. When it comes to ilm al-rijal, who should we refer to? Rijali scholars. We'll refer to Najashi and Kishi or Keshi and Tusi, because they are the specialists, they are the professionals, they are the founders, in fact. They are the founders of these studies, of this science, ilm al-rijal, Rijal studies. So we refer to them not because they are reliable people telling us a story, not because it's a testimony, not because it gives us dhann, presumption or conjecture, not because it gives us certainty or assurance, not because it's a fatwa, but because they are specialists. I refer to Najashi because I'm not a specialist. Because he is more knowledgeable than me when it comes to Rijal, when it comes to the biographies of men and women. When we say Rijal, by the way, and I believe I said this in previous lectures, but I'd like to emphasize, when we say Rijal, we don't necessarily mean men. We mean narrators and transmitters of hadith. And that is why even in Rijal, we might discuss the biographies of certain women. The books of Rijal, they might contain female narrators. So what we mean by Rijal, ilm Rijal, is the science of the studies of biographies of the narrators and transmitters. They are specialists, and we refer to them just like we would refer to any specialist in any field, in any science, in any profession. Hence, An-Najashi is a specialist, Tusi is a specialist, Keshi is a specialist, and we refer to them because they are specialists. In this case, we will solve lots of problems. Does a specialist have to be alive? No. A specialist could be dead, but as long as he's a specialist in a science, that's enough. Does the specialist have to be the most knowledgeable of the science? No. As long as he's a specialist, we may refer to him. Can it be a female? Could be a female. A specialist does not have to be a male. It could be a female. Does it have to be a group of specialists, or can we refer to one specialist? No, we could refer to one specialist. The same way that whatever we apply to other fields will apply to ilm al-rijal and rijal studies. They not need to be the most knowledgeable. It doesn't have to be a male. It doesn't have to be a group of specialists. It could be just one. And this is the opinion that we choose. قول أهل الخبرة الرجوع إلى أهل الخبرة. Rijali is أهل الخبرة. He's a specialist in his science, in his field, and hence we refer to him. Does this mean that this theory, this last pretext, it doesn't have any problems? It didn't face any problems? No. It did. In the next lecture, we will discuss what are the problems that this theory, this pretext, might face. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin.